Welcome to another podcast from Cy Green. In this episode, we break down the freshest research, hot off the press. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Oh, and before we start, hit subscribe and drop a comment to keep the green vibes growing.
All right, let's get right into it. The story of Steve Jobs. It's so much more than just the guy in the black turtleneck who gave us the iPhone. This is a dramatic roller coaster story about a brilliant and a difficult man who was literally exiled from his own kingdom, only to come back and change our world forever. It's a story all about failure and in the end about redemption. Wow, just think about that for a second. The man who co-founded one of the most valuable companies on the planet said that getting fired from it was the best thing that ever happened to him. That sounds completely crazy, right? To really get why he'd say something like that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay, so chapter 1. We're talking about a young, rebellious outsider in the early days of what we now call Silicon Valley. And let me tell you, he was definitely not your typical future CEO.
You gotta understand, Jobs was an outsider right from the get-go. He was adopted and he always struggled to fit in. He was this really weird mix of hippie counterculture, into art to calligraphy, even spiritual trips to India. But he was also a total tech nerd, obsessed with electronics. It was this strange combination that set the stage for everything. And then he met the actual engineering genius, Steve Wozniak. And that's when it all started to click. And yes, it literally started in his parents' garage. Look, you just can't understand the beginning of Apple without getting this partnership. They were two sides of the same coin. Wozniak, or Woz, was the pure engineer. He built the very first Apple computer just to prove he could, kind of to show off to his buddies. But it was Steve Jobs who looked at that board of circuits and saw the future. He was the visionary who knew how to package that genius, how to market it, and how to convince the entire world that they needed this thing they didn't even know existed yet. And boy, did things move fast. That little garage startup exploded into a corporate giant. But with that incredible success came some serious conflict inside the company, setting the stage for one of the most famous firings in the history of business. When the Macintosh was ready to launch, Apple wasn't just selling a computer anymore. They were selling an idea, a revolution. And nothing shows this better than their legendary 1984 Super Bowl ad. I mean, it positioned Apple as this rebellious, creative force fighting against the big, scary, conformist world of IBM. It was a massive cultural moment, and it set expectations through the roof. So to manage all this explosive growth, Jobs knew he needed what he called adult supervision. He wanted John Scully, the marketing whiz from Pepsi. And to get him, he used this killer line. I mean, come on, how do you possibly say no to a question like that? Scully jumped ship, and for a little while, they were the absolute dream team. But as you can probably guess, the honeymoon didn't last. When the first Macintosh sales didn't quite meet that insane hype, the cracks started to show. You had Jobs, the passionate, product-obsessed founder, clashing hard with Scully, the experienced corporate executive. They fought about everything: the price of the Mac, the company's direction, and Jobs', let's just say, intense management style. A collision was coming. And it all just blew up. Jobs tried to get the board to oust Scully behind his back, but Scully found out and confronted him in a massive boardroom showdown. He basically told the board, it's him or me. And the board, the very board that Jobs had helped build, chose the professional manager over the wild, mercurial founder. And just like that, Steve Jobs was stripped of all his power. He was in exile from his own company. So this brings us to what many people called the wilderness years. At the time, it looked like a humiliating public failure. But looking back now, this period of exile was where he learned the exact lessons he needed for his unbelievable second act. After leaving Apple, he started two companies. One was Next. They built these beautiful, technologically advanced computers that were way too expensive and never really sold. It was, by all accounts, a business failure. At the same time, he bought a little computer graphics company from George Lucas and named it Pixar. So you have Next, the quote-unquote failure, which is where he perfected the software that would one day save Apple. And you have Pixar, the wild, unexpected hit, which taught him a new way to lead creative geniuses. Oh, and it also made him a billionaire, thanks to Toy Story.
And this wasn't just about business. He was changing as a person, too. He finally reconnected with his first daughter, Lisa. He tracked down his birth mother and discovered he had a sister, the novelist Mona Simpson, who became one of his best friends. The point is, he was maturing. He was becoming a more complete person.
And that, of course, brings us to the comeback. Because by the mid-90s, the Apple that fired him was an absolute disaster. It was bleeding money, totally lost, and literally weeks away from going bankrupt. In a final desperate move, they knew they had to buy a new operating system to save themselves. So what was the best software out there? Well, it was the stuff being made at Next, Steve's failed company. So for $427 million, Apple didn't just buy a new operating system. They bought back their founder. He came back first as an advisor, but pretty soon he was running the whole show again. And Steve did not walk back in quietly. Nope. His assessment of the company was, let's just say it was direct. He told his employees that the company had just completely lost its way. It was making dozens of beige, boring, confusing products. He knew he had to bring back the passion, the focus, and, yeah, the sex appeal. His plan was swift and absolutely ruthless. First, he took an axe to the product line, killing dozens of projects. Then he simplified everything down to just 4 key products. He did the unthinkable and made a deal with his arch-rival Microsoft for a $150 million cash infusion. And finally, he launched the Think Different campaign to remind the world, and more importantly, his own people, what Apple was all about. So, the company is saved from the brink, but Jobs wasn't done. Not even close. This is where we get to the second act. This wasn't just about saving Apple anymore. This was about an unbelievable wave of innovation that was about to change everything. And it all kicked off with this thing, the iMac. It looked like nothing else on the market. It was colorful, it was fun, it was easy to use, it was a massive hit. And it was basically a giant, colorful announcement to the entire world that Apple was back. Next up, the iPod. I mean, remember this? 1,000 songs in your pocket? It seems so normal now, but back then it was mind-blowing. It wasn't just a great gadget, it totally upended the entire music industry, forever changing how we buy and listen to music. And then, 2007, the big one, the iPhone. It got rid of the physical keyboard, it gave us multi-touch, and it put a real, powerful computer connected to the internet right in our pockets. It didn't just compete with other phones, it made them all look like ancient relics overnight and created the modern world we live in now. And just when you thought he was done, he came out with the iPad. And at first, all the critics were saying, wait, it's just a big iPhone? But customers didn't listen. It became the fastest-selling consumer product in history, and it created an entirely new category of device that nobody even knew they wanted. It was a classic Jobs move. So when you look back at that second act, it's just staggering. He didn't just save his company, he reshaped music, phones, computing, even retail. He fundamentally changed how we all live, work, and connect with each other, cementing his legacy as one of the greatest innovators of all time. But you know, maybe the most important thing he ever designed wasn't a product. It was the culture he built at Apple. When he knew he was sick, he gave this advice to his successor, Tim Cook. He didn't want Apple to become some museum always wondering, what would Steve do? He built a company that was designed to innovate and last, long after he was gone. Which really leads us with this one last thought. What is his true legacy? Is it the incredible products he made that we use every single day? Or is it the story? The powerful, incredible story of a man who was cast out, who failed publicly, who learned from it, and came back to truly put a dent in the universe. Maybe the greatest lesson he left us is that our biggest failures can be the very foundation for our greatest triumphs.